Welcome back, everybody, to the Toma Todito Boxing Show. Thank you again for tuning in. And we have ourselves a Mexican showdown taking place tomorrow. Both fighters successfully made weight, actually came in quite a bit under. Canelo was 166 and change, where Jaime Munguia was 167 and change. And both of them look good. Neither one looks extremely dehydrated. Neither one looked like they were suffering. Both in good spirits, both smiling. And both fighters are bound to put on a hell of a show. Jaime Munguia, the taller of the two fighters, as is traditionally the case for the majority of fighters that face Canelo. And he looks good. He looked very well, very fit, very well filled. He didn't look overly dehydrated or drained. His facial structure was fine. Not when we've seen fighters in the past, like images in the past, like Conor McGregor, when he was severely dehydrated trying to make weight, just very skeletal. Look, Ryan Garcia, we've seen him like that. Devin Haney, we've seen like that. Even Canelo, at some point, we saw him when his diet wasn't right, or in the early stages of his career, where he would just severely dehydrate himself, especially when he was fighting at the 154-pound division. Both fighters look good. Both fighters look like they're going to be rehydrating quite a bit. I would think that Canelo will be stepping into the ring maybe around 180, where Jaime Munguia might be between the 180, 185 pounds, definitely the heavier fighter tomorrow by the time rehydration. I'm curious to see if they'll have a weigh-in prior to entering the ring, just to see how that weight manages, meaning these guys are going to be well above the light heavyweight limit by the time that they're rehydrated, and it's going to be a heavy-handed affair. Jaime Munguia possesses a lot of power. Jaime Munguia is on the up and up right now in his career, especially after having gone 5 or 6 fights with the legendary Erik Morales, who ended up fixing his stance, fixing his approach, fixing the way that he delivered punches, providing them with very much needed defense and getting his hands up, especially on the reset after throwing his punches, getting away from the looping punches and leaving himself exposed. Erik Morales did wonders for Jaime Munguia. The fact that they parted ways, I don't think had anything to do with either fighter not seeing or trainer and fighter not seeing eye to eye. I think it had more to do with the personal schedule of Erik Morales just wanting to take a break, wanting to approach new ventures and step away from the training for a little bit and from being the head trainer. Jaime Munguia ends up rolling over to Freddie Roach, and their debut together happened this past January, a fight where you guys heard me calling alongside a good buddy of mine in Joe, and who's like a young brother to me. We were live out in Phoenix where we called the Jaime Munguia John Ryder fight. You guys could go back and revisit those episodes. What a fun time that was. And we got to witness the debut of Jaime Munguia firsthand, in person, in a live setting with Freddie Roach in his corner. Erik Morales was in house, and he was also there witnessing and pulling for his former pupil. Jaime Munguia has momentum on his side. His confidence is at an all-time high, facing the last ranked opponent, mandatory to his opponent that will step into the ring against him tomorrow in Canelo Alvarez. The way that Jaime Munguia destroyed John Ryder, the way that he fought and picked John Ryder apart, especially in the later rounds, to be able to pull off the stoppage, the way that he managed to ragdoll him in a way where he managed to drop him time and again, until he finally got the final drop and stoppage in the 9th round, if I recall correctly. It was a firefight. It was a fight where John Ryder provided a huge test to Jaime Munguia in the way of experience, in the way of how sneaky he was with those punches, how he managed to sneak those uppercuts time and again and find success against Jaime Munguia. Hopefully that's something that Freddie Roach and Munguia will tighten up on, because it's a really quick successive uppercut that John Ryder was releasing, Canelo releases a similar uppercut on the inside, especially when he's against the ropes. When Canelo finds himself against the ropes, he manages to sneak a huge uppercut, and usually it's a very sneaky way that he delivers it, but it possesses a lot of power, which tends to send his opponents back in their tracks. To which Canelo will start waving the opponents to come back in for more and baiting them, and the opponents traditionally oblige, close in the quarters, and Canelo will sneak in a couple punches again in between the opponent's guards. This is something that Munguia has to watch out for, because he got caught time and again with that type of uppercut and that type of sneaky punch that John Ryder was not even winding up for, just sneaking those punches in and finding a lot of success where he busted up Munguia numerous times with that punch or with those selective punches. Munguia has to watch out for that, because Canelo's punches come with a lot more speed and a lot more power behind them. Nonetheless, Munguia passing that test of John Ryder this past January with a new trainer in his corner in Freddie Roach. Seems like they already hit the ground running from the start. By the time that they were there, they were communicating very well. He listens to Freddie Roach very well. He implements the plan or the strategy that Freddie Roach will lead him with in between rounds. Jaime Munguia is at a good spot in his career right now, possibly at the best point in his career right now since we've ever seen him. He's continuously shown improvement with Erik Morales, and now has shown a new level of Jaime Munguia this past January, which is what we're expecting to see tomorrow night. Jaime Munguia has momentum on his side, like I said. He is communicating well with his new trainer in Freddie Roach. A good strategy, a good plan will be formulated by Freddie Roach and by that corner. And if it comes to a point where they begin to exchange, yes, you do favor Canelo Alvarez and his experience and his power. But Munguia possesses a lot of power himself as well. Jaime Munguia drops and stops his opponents. He's a very, very strong fighter himself. He's a very quick fighter himself when releasing punches. The critiques of Jaime Munguia have always been he leaves himself too open. He loops his punches, exposing the center. And that he gets hit a lot. He's been slowly fixing that. And Ryder did expose that once again in the sense of he gets hit a lot. Ryder hit him a lot. But Munguia proved to have a granite chin on that night and proved to weaken Ryder's chin to the point where he stopped him. John Ryder would eventually take a few days off and come out into the public and announce his official retirement post Munguia. Munguia is 43-0 with 34 knockouts. And those of you that have been following me from the very beginning, whenever I posted an episode on Jaime Munguia, you guys could keep me honest and go back and check out the catalog and search the catalog for the Jaime Munguia episodes that I have up there. And you guys have heard me in the past, from when he first jumped into the ring with Erik Morales in his back. You guys have heard me over and over and over again say it. How much more do you guys want to prep this guy? They're derailing Jaime Munguia's career in the way that they were finding him opponents that had shared the ring with the fighters that he was calling out. He was calling out Charlo. He would end up fighting an opponent, or at least be scheduled to fight an opponent in common. He finally ended up fighting Derevyanchenko, which was one of the toughest tests that Munguia had to date. He would call out Golovkin. He fought Ceremeta. He's been calling out Canelo for a long time. Now he fought John Ryder. He fought Demetrius Ballard. Gabe Rosado. You think about the fights that he's had, and almost every time it was either another fighter that was trying to break into the top 20, top 15, top 10, someone with momentum on their side, someone highly touted as a prospect, someone breaking into the top 10 and in line or lining himself up respectively for a title shot. Those are the opposition, or those are the opponents that were being sought after for Jaime Munguia. He would call out the big stars, but fight the up-and-comers. Until he fought Gary O'Sullivan. When he fought Spike, that was one of the big step-ups for him, because now he was challenging international opposition in the sense of a European style that tend to be a little trickier. Same when he fought Dennis Hogan. When he fought Gabe Rosado, a great fight between the two, the veteran fighter. Now Munguia was starting to cement himself as a who's who, fighting veterans and very experienced opposition. That's what Gabe Rosado brought to the table. Gabe Rosado, something curious, had Freddie Roach in his corner when he fought Munguia, who had Eric Morales at that fight in his corner. Sergey Dvorachenko, I stand by that. The toughest test to date that Jaime Munguia has stepped into the ring against. And John Ryder, again, that was a firefight at this high level of boxing that Jaime Munguia finds himself in. He withstood fire with fire and stopped the opponent. The opponent that he shares in common with Canelo Alvarez, who was Canelo's very last opponent, who happened to be a mandatory for one of his belts. The last outing that Canelo Alvarez had was against former 154-pounder undisputed champ in Jermell Charlo, who stepped up to divisions to challenge Canelo for his throne and came up short. Canelo did his job. He defended his throne. If somebody goes to 154 and challenges Charlo, even though he doesn't have any of the belts, he is the last and the only to have completed such a feat at 154 pounds, that being of undisputed. So with Crawford and Madrimov happening, with Fundora and Sue that took place, now Sue's going to fight Virgil Ortiz. Brian Castaño has not been heard of. You have other names that are in there where anybody who wants to be anybody at 154 eventually are going to have to answer the call of Jermell Charlo, who was the last undisputed champ at that division. Since then, Canelo, you could say, yes, he is in great shape, but he fought a smaller fighter, a great mega fight type event, but he fought a smaller fighter in Jermell Charlo. Even though he was taller, even though he weighed at the limit, even though he possibly rehydrated to a higher level or similar to Canelo, he competes with lighter opposition. He's never gone up to fight light heavyweights, whereas Canelo has. So the levels, there's a difference for those levels. There's a difference for divisions. Canelo defended his throne. Jaime Munguia continued on the up and up like he should. And now he's finally getting an opponent that he's been calling out for years now in Canelo Alvarez. He called out Triple G. That never happened. Should Jaime Munguia be successful, and again, those of you that have followed my show for years now, you guys could go back and revisit and listen to those episodes with Jaime Munguia that I've covered in the past, and you guys could hear me say time and again, episode after episode, why is Jaime Munguia continue to get prepped? How much more do you guys want to prep him? Throw him in now. He's ready. He's as good as he's been. Throw him in there. Before people start forgetting about him, before people start discarding him. as another Mayweather era-esque type fighter that believe their own hype and begin to compete in a low-risk, high-reward environment, which is how a lot of careers destroyed themselves. Keith Thurman is the one that comes to mind, because all these fighters at that time in the 2010s and mid-2010s, nobody wanted to fight anybody. Everything was excuses, everything was money, everything was about this, and you're not a draw, and you're not... And finally, in the last couple of years, we've been getting the big fights and the most popular fighters and the most accomplished fighters fighting one another. And this month will be no exception. If this would have been Canelo Benavidez today, as soon as the fight concluded, if Benavidez would be successful, then Benavidez and Munguia, Benavidez, Bivol, Benavidez, whatever. If Canelo beats Benavidez, then the very next opponent would have been Jaime Munguia. Are you gonna face Jaime Munguia? You refuse to fight Mexican fighters. So it never ends. That's the game. Canelo Alvarez and Jaime Munguia is the right fight, is a good fight. It's gonna be a great fight for as long as it lasts. I'm not saying, and you guys could hear me on the post-fight show coverage that we did of Munguia Ryder. Joe and I are covering this, and we both say that Munguia and Canelo will be a great fight for as long as it lasts. For some reason, I have the 8th round hovering in my head. I don't know who gets to stop. Everything's favoring Canelo, but this is going to be a big fight and an important one for 168, because at that point, all roads are leading to David Benavidez, and there should be no more avoidance. Canelo has cleaned out this division with new opposition appearing, because remember, when Canelo started this journey of accomplishing and obtaining all the titles, Jaime Munguia was a 160-pounder. So was Andrade. So was everybody else. David Benavidez never really did anything at middleweight, not until he started competing at 168. Similar for Zurdo Ramirez. Zurdo Ramirez never really accomplished the levels that he wanted to at middleweight, not until he reached 168. We keep hearing all week during the fight week that this is a huge fight for Mexico. Yes, but it's a huge fight for all boxing fans across the board. It's a huge fight here in the U.S. because Mexico doesn't celebrate Cinco de Mayo, but the U.S. does for some reason. And it's a very marketable festive weekend here in the U.S., not in Mexico. Not to the levels that it exists here in the U.S. So it's a huge fight for boxing. It's a huge fight for boxing fans. It's a huge weekend that attracts eyeballs that are not traditionally tuned into the sport of boxing. It's not just a huge fight and a huge weekend for Mexico. It's a huge weekend for the U.S. and for boxing in general and boxing fans from around the world. And the card overall reminds me of cards of yesteryear, where the main event took all the attention and the rest of the card, interesting / subpar. The co-main event needed to be a bigger co-main event, but it's an okay one, between Mario Barrios and Fabian Maldana, who is 9 years younger than the popular Maldana, Marcos Maldana, the former champ, multi-division champ, who shook and made waves in the sport of boxing with his victory over Victor Ortiz, over Adrian Broner, his fights with Floyd Mayweather, where he knocks Mayweather's tooth and now seems to carry it around as as a necklace. He turned that tooth into a necklace. Fabian Maldana has been trying to carve his own path. His nickname is TNT as a heavy-handed fighter. He steps into this fight with 2 defeats, both unanimous decision losses against relatively unknown opponents. This is the biggest stage of his career to date. He will be fighting Mario Barrios, who is the interim WBC champ. Barrios, of course, we know he has his 2 defeats. He came to prominence with his courageous performance against Tank Davis when Tank moved up to 140 to challenge the weaker of the champions at that point, which was Mario Barrios. Tank took on him, eventually stops him, became champ at 140. Mario Barrios, with that courageous performance against Tank, garnered the attention of the boxing world. He would then go on to find himself in a multitude of entertaining fights. His very next outing, he moved up from 140 to 147, debuted at welterweight against none other than Keith Thurman. He lost a unanimous decision in that fight, but a very good fight that he gave Keith Thurman, who has fought three times in the last 5 years, I believe. That's Keith Thurman, who was the top dog at welterweight at one point, post-Mayweather. Has a hell of a resume with names on there like no other. The sole loss of his career came at the hands of an old Manny Pacquiao, and found himself in a firefight against Mario Barrios. Barrios came on the losing end of that fight, but won fans over. He would then go on to stop Giovanni Santiago, and then he went on to fight Yordenis Ugas and also got a unanimous decision victory over Ugas. That's what's gotten Mario Barrios to this level. He is the WBC interim champ at welterweight. He's in it to win it. Every single time that he steps in the ring, he brings it. And this should be no exception. This fight favors Mario Barrios. And Fabian Maldana, known as TNT, does possess power, but I don't see the upset happening on this one. I see Mario Barrios being successful and continuing in his path to unify for or fight for a full version world title at welterweight. The other welterweight clash that's going to be taking place on this card is going to be Eimantas Stanionis, who is finally back. After numerous fights canceled, his fight with Virgil Ortiz, his fight with Errol Spence, numerous fights canceled, numerous fights postponed, rescheduled, what have you. And now he's going to be facing a Venezuelan former foe of his dating back to the amateur days in Gabriel Maestre. Maestre is 6-0-1 with 5 knockouts to his credit, a very heavy-handed but a slow fighter. Not the most elusive footwork, slow but good power behind those punches. Stanionis, very well-rounded, should be successful in this one, but these two fighters know each other very well. Stanionis undefeated to date, but is coming off of a long layoff. He's the WBA champ at the 147-pound division. He got elevated to the champ status after those belts started getting pulled from Crawford, who became the undisputed after his defeat of Errol Spence. That should be an entertaining fight because these two guys know each other. Maestre and Stanionis, dating back to their amateur days, they also had future after their first encounter where Stanionis got the best of Maestre, they were supposed to run into each other in another amateur competition in the finals where both of them ended up getting defeated and neither made it to the final, which everybody was clamoring for that fight, for that rematch. Never happened. Now they get to see each other in the professional ranks with the highest stakes possible, a world championship in between, standing in the way of these two, or at stake for this fight. Should be a very interesting fight. I see Maestre being a lot slower, Stanionis accumulating the damage, and I think Stanionis, if he doesn't pull off the stoppage in the later rounds, I'm thinking between 9 and 12, then Stanionis will walk away with the decision on this. But I think Stanionis is firing on a different level of cylinder. His cylinders are just full force right now, where Gabriel Maestre has not faced the top level of opposition, even though he's being brought up quite fast, quite well, because he is older. He's a 37-year-old fighter. He's not at the level of Stanionis and has not experienced what Stanionis has experienced as a professional. So Stanionis is favored to retain his title on this one. Should Mario Barrios win, which I really believe he will, and Stanionis be successful, which I believe he will as well, I see a Barrios-Stanionis fight down the line. Easy fight to make for PBC, both in very similar spots in their career. Interesting showdown between those two. El Mono Ramos from Casa Grande, Arizona. Jesus Ramos will also be in action. He is back. His sole defeat at the hand of Erickson Lubin, which was also on the undercard of Canelo. I believe that was a Canelo-Charlo card last September. Jesus Ramos is back, and he's going to be fighting another Venezuelan. This Venezuelan fighter is known as Johan Gonzalez, who has very decent opposition and a very good record, but not the same level of opposition that Jesus Ramos has faced. Both in similar points of their careers. Johan Gonzalez, very heavy-handed, very quick delivery, very good pedigree himself, but is a bit of a headhunter, where Jesus Ramos varies his attack and will deliver to the body. He does attack the body a lot more than Johan is known to do. Johan stepping into this fight with a 34-2 record, where Jesus Ramos is 20-1. And the way, if he continues to vary his attack, eliminate the body and eliminate the legs of his opponent, in Gonzalez, he definitely has the power to go toe-to-toe with Gonzalez. Gonzalez possesses a lot of pop. He's taller, he's lankier. Ramos is more of your bite down and throw down type fighter. And I think this fight's going to be a fun one. Could potentially steal the show. But all very, very good fights so far that we've talked about. Not the biggest names is why I made the comment at the beginning, before we started reviewing these, that it's up-and-coming prospects. There is a couple champions here, or a couple titles at stake, but they're lesser known people, which gives the ultimate highlight to the main event, similar to what we were accustomed to seeing years back. And last but not least, Brandon Figueroa and Jesse Magdaleno. Brandon Figueroa, the interim WBC champ at 126 pounds. He's looking to continue his winning ways and get himself into a full unification bout against Ray Vargas. Ray Vargas retained his title after the split draw with Nick Ball. I believe that fight happened in March, or just happened not that long ago this year. Ray Vargas and Nick Ball. Nick Ball is now going to be challenging Ray Ford at 126 pounds for his strap that he won back in December. And Raymond Ford is one of the two opponents that defeated Jesse Magdaleno, the opponent to Brandon Figueroa tomorrow. Raymond Ford got the decision over Jesse Magdaleno, and Isaac Dogbe stopped Jesse Magdaleno. Those are the two blemishes on Magdaleno's record, a former champ at 126 pounds. He did not make weight. He came in 2 pounds over, which means the interim title will be there for Brandon Figueroa to retain. But if Magdaleno wins, Magdaleno cannot win it. But he could get the dub, which is what everybody's after, and then recoup for the next one. 29-2, Jesse Magdaleno. Brandon Figueroa, 24-1-1. Of course, that one defeat came at the hands of Stephen Fulton, Cool Boy Steph, when they had that big unification at 122 pounds. Stephen Fulton got the nod and ended up unifying, walking out with 2 titles. Brandon Figueroa, after that fight, protested the result, but eventually ended up moving to 126. That was a fight that was very telling that he could no longer make the weight of 122. He ended up going up in weight. And he has a draw against Julio Ceja, which took place in 2019. That was a split draw in a 12-round fight. Other than that, Brandon Figueroa is as good as you could get, as big a threat, taller than most at 126, longer reach than most at 126, and a lot of power. He is a come forward, punches and bunches type fighter, where Jesse Magdaleno is traditionally the heavier handed, more elusive, who relies more on his footwork. And that's going to be an interesting battle between these two, because we're going to have similar to what we saw Brandon Figueroa and Stephen Fulton, a similar showdown to that, where Jesse Magdaleno could definitely control the fight from the outside and possesses good power behind him, where he could potentially hurt Figueroa. Again, we're not accustomed to seeing Figueroa hurt because Brandon keeps coming forward. He gets hit and he walks through him. Now he's facing a former champ in Jesse Magdaleno. Very, very good matchup. Very good step up for Brandon Figueroa. And especially if he retains his title, we're bound to see Rey Vargas against Brandon Figueroa later this year as a unification for the WBC full version title. So the card is going to be very entertaining until we get to the main event. Canelo Alvarez is favored. Canelo Alvarez has the odds in his favor as far as betting goes. Everybody's thinking that he's going to pull off the stoppage. What a long fight week it was. It felt a little longer than most, especially after that encounter that Oscar De La Hoya had with Canelo. Of course, we got to talk about it because it went viral. Oscar De La Hoya making the comment, going to the podium. Canelo Alvarez, I guess dating back and leading to that moment, Canelo Alvarez did everything possible to block out Golden Boy Promotions and Oscar De La Hoya from taking any part in this event. Oscar De La Hoya is a co-promoter alongside Sanford of Jaime Munguia and a former promoter of Canelo Alvarez. Oscar De La Hoya is right that when Canelo Alvarez was under the Golden Boy banner, that's when Canelo was being built as a megastar, as a worldwide star, until he left, until he departed and went to DAZN with Eddie Hearn and made that pact. And lawsuits and hate and everything, contractual disputes, you name it, that took place between Canelo and Golden Boy. So there was always something there between those two, and eventually it was going to boil over, and it did. And it happened during the press conference on Wednesday. Oscar De La Hoya telling Canelo Alvarez to basically not forget where he came from, not forget who built him, and to put some respect, with expletives, put some respect on his name, on the Golden Boy name that belongs to Oscar De La Hoya. Canelo Alvarez lost his cool, got off from his chair, tried to get into the face of Oscar De La Hoya. They exchanged comments, followed by more expletives on behalf of Canelo, and Oscar got into his head. Even though everybody's denying it, when you have an outburst such as the one that Canelo had, when you start cursing and insulting somebody, obviously they pulled an emotional string and they got in your head. Maturity flies out the window and it becomes all ego at that point, where you don't care. You just want to score points and win. So you will stoop to whatever level to get the final laugh, or the final victory, or the final point, which is what Canelo did. He started sending insults down to Oscar De La Hoya, cursing at him, calling him names. And when you see that, don't say that they didn't get to you. They got to you. Oscar De La Hoya went there to stir things up. Canelo Alvarez did everything possible to keep the Golden Boy banner and the Golden Boy name out of the promotion. And if you look at it, not a single mention of Golden Boy Promotions being involved with this. That was one of the agreements that Canelo had. So he dealt with Zamfir. He dealt with Beltran from Zamfir to make this fight possible for Jaime Munguia, with the agreement that Golden Boy would not be anywhere near the event. So the fact that Oscar got up there to speak was more than enough. That Oscar, not just the fact that he got up there to speak, that was already, the fact that he was sitting up there was already rubbing Canelo and his team the wrong way. Then he gets up to the podium. Canelo must have been like, hey, you guys, we did not agree to this. And then Oscar lets him have it, telling him to put some respect in his name. And Canelo was boiling. If he was boiling internally, he couldn't hold it. And he had his outburst. But if you look at the banner, if you look at the promotion, if you go online and look at this card, the way it's being billed, the posters, not a single mention of Golden Boy. And that was Canelo's doing. Yesterday, the press conference happened for the undercard, and that was fairly uneventful. Everybody continued to talk about the day prior and the Oscar Canelo encounter. If you haven't seen it, just go on YouTube and you'll find it. You'll find a bunch of shorts. You'll find the encounter, the back and forth. You'll find post-fight interviews that Bernardo Osuna did on ESPN. If you want to find them in Spanish and put the captions, you'll be able to get the translation. That was possibly two of the best interviews that I saw related to this, not the typical camera in your face Fight Hub approach or the other websites that tend to do the same thing. This guy had full conversations, Bernardo Osuna, in detail with both, for ESPN in Spanish, in detail with Canelo, with Munguia, and with Oscar de la Hoya as to what took place and what they were feeling at that moment, moments after they both erupted on stage. That was possibly the best interview, the Bernardo Osuna one on ESPN. Thursday was fairly uneventful. Everybody kept talking about that. Friday, the weigh-ins happened, and fairly uneventful as well, but Oscar showed up to take more digs at Canelo while he was on stage wearing a t-shirt with a picture of a big steak and the words saying, "Eat more meat." Straight jab at Canelo, dating back to the days of the tainted meat, the tainted Mexican meat that had him fail his tests, leading to the Triple G fight, the Triple G rematch. Oscar de la Hoya taking a page out of Ryan Garcia's book and Mayweather's book and taking jabs at him, at Canelo, not missing a chance. After the weigh-ins, successful for both fighters, for both headliners, Canelo begins the round of interviews, as does Jaime Munguia. He begins to walk out. Oscar wasn't there to be found, so no encounter between them two. They were kept apart fairly well by security and their teams. But Canelo does have an encounter with Bernard Hopkins, who is the co-owner of Golden Boy Promotions. Bernard Hopkins embraces Canelo, hugs him, whispers in his ear for nearly 30 seconds to a minute. They both embrace, shake hands, hug it out, and continue on their ways. Another fighter that was there, a former foe and conquest of Canelo, in Caleb Plant. Edgar Berlanga was walking around there, the weigh-ins, claiming that he is next for Canelo in September. He has an encounter with Caleb Plant where he tells Caleb Plant that he's going to knock him out. Caleb Plant goes back with him, very calm, cool, and collected like he always is. And if that fight happens, Berlanga and Canelo, then you bet that the criticisms will come out an even bigger way for Canelo if he does agree to fight Berlanga. That would basically be a clear message to ice out David Benavidez, who, if Canelo is successful, the very next opponent needs to be David Benavidez. And that's it. You'll conquer the entire 168-pound division, leaving no question unanswered. But because it's become personal, Canelo would definitely ice out David Benavidez. Benavidez will be in action in June. So that would be kind of a quick turnaround for him to fight in September, where Canelo could very well fight Berlanga, and then in December, fight David Benavidez to close out the year. If we do get a Canelo Benavidez in September with a successful Canelo tomorrow night, of course looking forward, and a successful Benavidez who will be trying his hand one division north at light heavyweight against Gvozdyk, a former WBC champ at light heavyweight. And both of them are successful and they do face off against one another in September. Then Munguia, regardless of how he performs tomorrow, will be the top dog to be in line for the winner of that fight. Caleb Plant has continued to get himself up there. Even though he lost to David Benavidez, he lost to Canelo, he's building himself back up for another title shot. David Morrell will be in action soon. I believe he's going to be part of the LA card on the undercard of Madrimov Crawford in August, so that would be too soon for him to fight in September. So Berlanga would be the most obvious choice, but depending on what happens tomorrow, if Canelo decides that he is going to take the fight against Benavidez in September, should he be successful, don't doubt that a Munguia Berlanga would be a sure shot fight. If Berlanga beats Canelo tomorrow, you bet that Benavidez is going to be seeking that fight with Munguia, and Munguia would definitely honor that and go against Benavidez. But if they wait to build that hype up between those two a little more, Munguia and Benavidez, then yes, Berlanga would most likely find himself in a main event against Jaime Munguia, who would be the successor tomorrow. So Berlanga's in there in conversations. If he doesn't manage to get himself, and he said it today against Caleb Plant, he said, if my fight with Canelo doesn't happen in September, then I will fight you and I will knock you out. Telling Caleb Plant that, and Caleb Plant turned to the media and said, you guys all heard that. If he doesn't get Canelo in September, he's willing to fight me. Berlanga opened his mouth. Berlanga has no room to be asking for a fight of such magnitude. He will not beat Jaime Munguia. He will not beat Caleb Plant. He will not beat David Benavidez. He will not beat David Morrell, let alone contend with Canelo Alvarez. So I hope the Caleb Plant-Edgar Berlanga fight happens, and that would be another highlight reel added to the career of Caleb Plant, similar to that of Anthony Durrell. Decent undercard. It should provide enough action between the Ramos and Johan Gonzalez fight. The Brandon Figueroa, Jesse Magdaleno, in my opinion, will steal the show of the undercards. Stanionis, Gabriel Maestre may be a slower fight, an entertaining one, but a slower fight. Mario Barrios and Maldana will be a bloody one, I think, where there will be cuts, there will be blood. It will be a heavy-handed affair where they will exchange, and there will be a stoppage in that fight, one way or the other. I'm slightly favoring Mario Barrios on that one. I'm favoring Stanionis, who's the champ, to retain his title. The Jesse Magdaleno Brandon Figueroa is a very interesting one because Magdaleno missed weight, but he is a former champ. Possibly the toughest test for Brandon Figueroa, if not in his career, because he's been at the top levels of any division that he's campaigned at. Figueroa has. But this would definitely be the toughest test for him at featherweight in Jesse Magdaleno. So very, very interesting fight. Long fight week. Who knows how much more drama there will be tomorrow. But I can't wait. I can't wait. And I know you're excited for it as well. I'll see what happens tomorrow. If I'm able to do some live episodes as the undercard is playing out, consider it done. If I'm free and able to, you can bet that I will be sitting in front of this microphone bringing you some live coverage of that action as it's taking place. from whatever I may be tomorrow. But I won't be in Vegas, that's for sure. But wherever I'm at, if I'm able to, I'll do some live coverage for you. At the very least, I will do a post-fight episode. And I'll talk to you guys then. Take care of yourselves. Big action weekend at that, because Monday, you got Panterita Neri facing the monster, Naoya Inoue, out in Japan. That's a huge fight. A lot of boxing this weekend, and a big Cinco de Mayo weekend, because as it usually is. There's NBA playoffs. I believe there's horse racing. I don't know if it's a Hollywood Park or one of those big races that takes place, but usually is the case on a Cinco de Mayo weekend with horse racing. There's NBA playoffs. There's a UFC event taking place out in Brazil. And so there's going to be a lot of events happening tomorrow. But of course, the one that's stealing the night is Canelo Alvarez and Jaime Munguia. And I can't wait to see how this plays out. If Jaime Munguia is successful, he's going to need to avoid the exchanges on the ropes. Canelo will bait him. And Canelo is very quick with sneaking his punches in, whether it be uppercuts or punches straight to the nose, to the nose, where he sends them down range in such a quick fashion from such close quarters that Canelo finds a lot of success and tends to weaken his opponents, like he did with Caleb Plant, like he did with Callum Smith. Look for Canelo to be weakening the body of Munguia, whether it be by way of body shots, which is the go-to of Canelo. The body shots will be huge for him, and that's how everybody sees this fight stopping for Canelo, with a huge body shot, similar to what we saw Virgil Ortiz pull off against Thomas Delorme. That's kind of the stoppage that everybody's envisioning of Canelo Alvarez as far as media goes and what I've been hearing and seeing. Jaime Munguia getting in a firefight in the center of the ring would be exciting for everybody. And I think it slightly favors him because he's got a block of a head and a granite chin to date that has been tested and tried. The issue for Munguia would be the looping punches, the body shots, and the uppercuts. If he's able to stay clear or mitigate the damage from those Canelo punches and delivers downrange to Canelo, especially in the center of the ring, Munguia will find a lot of success. BJ Saunders was having success early on. Caleb Plant was having success early on. But if you try to box him and move like Caleb Plant did, like most boxers try, like Charlo did, the accumulation of damage that Canelo puts on you begins to wear. And the wear and tear tends to start diminishing these fighters in the second half of the fight. That's Canelo's go-to. Munguia has good boxing, good speed, good fast delivery, punches in quick succession. When they're down center, down range, needs to get away from those looping punches where he exposes his chin. And lucky for him that Canelo doesn't throw too much down range, but rather loops his punches, loops his hooks, and throws a lot of power shots. Lucky for Munguia that if he's able to mitigate that damage, he will be able to get the upper hand down center. Don't make it a boxing match with Canelo, muddy it up. And may the cards fall where as they may. So I leave you guys with that. An exciting weekend ahead of us for boxing, and what a long fight week it's been, but an interesting one at that, with viral moments obviously that took place, a lot to talk about, and here we go. The Zone is going to be broadcasting this via their pay-per-view streaming site, or portion payperview.com, and amongst the many. Amazon's going to be streaming this as well, so it's going to be expensive, but it's going to be out there and available. So I hope you guys enjoy the fight. I can't wait to hear from you guys. I can't wait to read the comments. And as soon as you see the post to this episode, feel free to leave me a message, please. Feel free to leave me a message, please. On the Instagram page where I post the episodes, you know that as soon as I post a cover there on Instagram or I actually upload a post, then you guys know that the episode is available on the podcast. Leave me a comment. Let's communicate. Let's talk. Let's have fun with this one. And we could prognosticate as to what the future holds for either of these fighters. And let's pick. And if you guys want to follow me on X, I'll definitely be putting on there some type of like a survey to see, or multiple surveys throughout the night to see how we're seeing the fight, how we're feeling about it as we get close to it, how we're seeing it as the fight's taking place, and so forth. So communicate with me on X and leave me comments, and we'll go back and forth, and that way we could start engaging one another. So I thank you guys again for continuing to tune in. The downloads keep happening, and the show keeps growing, and I owe it all to you guys. Thank you guys again. Have yourselves a great night. Thank you for the support, for the love. And I'll catch you on the next episode on the recap of the Canelo Munguia big headlining event taking place tomorrow night. Have a good one. Take care.